Behold!
Oh my goodness me!
For all of your paintings, I will give you 20,000 of these, £100,000.
At Turner's house at Queen Anne Street, he built a gallery on the side to exhibit his paintings and for buyers to come and view them.
Oh, Mr. Turner, I am quite overwhelmed.
Do as you wish, view as you wish.
So we took over a house in Woolwich, which was empty. It was owned by a developer. And we had the exact plans of Turner's gallery, and we built a version of the side of that house.
Oh my, these are breathtaking, are they not?
Whatever film I've made has involved massive research. Sometimes, as in the case of Topsy Turvy, as in this case, in the case of Vera Drake, we've had a specialist full-time researcher. You have to.
Lord Nelson's flagship, the Victory.
Indeed.
My involvement was trying to make sure that the pictures that were hanging in the gallery on any one day of any one moment in the film was actually as close as possible to what would have been hanging at that moment.
I am struck by the column of bright white placed precisely off-centre here.
Blue balls.
Eh?
Up in the muslin. Knock them out.
I didn't put them there.
Would it not sit splendidly above the fireplace in the library, Father?
Oh, it would, but I fear it may be beyond our purse, John.
No.
I'm sure some arrangement can be come to, sir.
Andres.
That's fine.
Yeah, fine.
Where we started is with Mike's incredible excitement for Turner and his long-standing ambition to do this film, which we knew had to include the big hitters. It had to include the pinnacles of his work, but also it had to include a real body of his work. So we knew we had to get permission and we had to get support.
We wanted to do the subject justice, basically, so we took it very seriously. We have a number of wonderful collaborators on the team, and from the outset, actually, we were helped enormously by the copyright owners.
My, what have we here?
Oh, it's Hannibal crossing the Alps.
Do you see the elephant?
An elephant?
He's in there somewhere.
Are you teasing me, Mr. Turner?
By no means, madam.
We approached the National Gallery and obviously the Tate, who are the major stakeholders in Turner's legacy. We approached large collections and smaller collections and asked for their help. And they have been nothing short of wonderful.
Can you find him?
Well, no, I cannot.
There he is.
Oh!
The Tate started the ball rolling by letting us have the images free of copyright. And then from then on, everyone else joined in. So we were really, really lucky. We couldn't have done it. I mean, there's not a chance because it's really expensive to get those clearances.
And then the question was, how are we going to make 200 paintings look like paintings? Because once upon a time, the dream was, let's get these all painted. But when you start pricing that up, it's impossible. But also, they just don't have the same quality. So it was, how to make them look like paintings. We did so many tests and so many experiments. We printed it on canvas, paper, kind of the silk material, all kinds of things, and tried all different kinds of printers, try and find how we were going to recreate it. And once we found a printer that we were happy with, it was a question of getting that feeling of paint on top. Basically paint without pigment. So it allows Turner's colours to come through, but just gives it that layer of paint, so that hopefully it feels like paint.
This is the period where landscape painting, what we now call romantic landscape painting, is really starting to occur in the late 18th, early 19th century, where, because of the significant wars in Europe, you're getting more people travelling around Britain itself and discovering their own country rather than travelling abroad on the grand tour to Italy and Paris and all that kind of thing. So you get an increase of interest in the idea of the British landscape and the sort of the sublime nature of the mountains and the seas and the coasts of Great Britain, and trying to set it down onto oil and canvas. And that's the romantic landscape period, and Turner's very much part of that.
£100,000, what do you say?
Turner was a very hard-working, serious, committed artist on a long and complex journey. I mean, he did not let up. In the Tate Britain alone, there are 20,000 pieces of work by Turner, yes. I mean, that includes all kinds of drawings and sketches, things, but that's the Turner legacy.
With a modicum of regret and somewhat of a heavy heart, I'm sorry to say Is that the question?
What he felt, I think, was that he had sacrificed and had devoted his entire life, to the detriment of his private life, to his work and to establishing a form of painting in Britain, his own, to be the leading light, in a sense, to be a man of destiny. I suppose you could construe it as being egotistical, but it wasn't. It was more to do with establishing British art. And I think he just felt that it all had to be together and left in the nation as a gift, because that's what he had done.
I read the biography of Turner and I suddenly started to think, here is a guy who absolutely qualifies for being the main character in a Mike Leigh film. He was very enigmatic, he's very complex, honest but dishonest, totally truthful and thoroughly disingenuous, an absolute embracer of the truth who is in denial on occasions about his children.
Good day to you, sir.
And a very good day to you, Mrs. D.
And how do we find you on this fair morning?
Exceedingly preoccupied, madam.
Was ever thus? You've always been preoccupied. You're too preoccupied for your own good, sir. Evelina, Georgina, come and greet your father.
Good day, Father.
It's just a slight drop down. Mike asked me over 2 years ago to work with Tim to basically teach him to paint and to, have some understanding of Turner's method and what it would be like to be a painter at the time.
Does that look like one of the...
Yeah. It's tricky because he's got to act as well, and it's very, very difficult to do.
He almost gave me a foundation course and then taught me how to the basics of oil painting, the basics of drawing, life class, still life, and then we started doing oils, and then I copied the full-size Turner, exactly the same size of one of his greatest paintings. So that was over a 2.5 year period. But the first time I had to be seen painting in the film, quite early on, was painting a straight line on a ship. Now, it's bad enough trying to paint a straight line with an oil brush anyway, but when you've got 56 people, a camera watching you do it, and Mike Leigh standing behind you, it's quite a difficult thing to do. But I managed it. So that whole preparation, really, the funny thing was, it turned out that I had a bit of ability, which made it more frustrating because I knew how good Turner was, and I knew that I was never going to reach it. So I got about as good as he was when he was about 9, I think.
The job was really not to turn Tim into Turner. I mean, Tim did have a famous traumatic moment, having spent months preparing and doing paintings. When he then went into character, and first time he did an improvisation where he actually played Turner, actual painting, he came out of it in a terrible state. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, I've just realised I'm not Turner." I said, "You don't have to paint Turners, but when we come to it, it will make it possible to look plausible."
My name's Charlie Kolb, and I'm painting the unfinished Turner paintings where Timothy Spall is working up the paintings, and we see him kind of at work on these unfinished paintings. The brushes, he tended to use squirrel tail, and then for his oil paintings he often used hog hair, which is quite rough, so you can get quite scratchy kind of marks with. A lot of the colours you can buy in tubes, and it's easier obviously if it's already made up, but there are some colours, so for instance green earth, it's never quite got the same quality to using the pigment. Green earth always requires quite a lot of oil.
How do you think Turner would have done it?
Well, I mean, he had his dad, who famously prepared his canvases and his paints, and as a sort of studio assistant. So this is the Muller. Because this is an earth pigment, the particle sizes are quite big, so you can actually hear the kind of grittiness of the paint, and you start to get a feel for the different qualities of the pigments. You can prepare as much as possible and be using the right pigments and the right materials, and the right kinds of brushes and palette knives and so on. But once you're painting, it becomes more about intuition, what kind of feels right.
We'd say, OK, for this particular painting, we want it hardly started, half finished, nearly finished. But any time in the film you see a completely finished painting, then it's an actual reproduction of the painting.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, madam.
It is Mrs. Somerville.
Yes, you are expected.
Thank you most kindly.
Oh, what an elegant residence.
We knew that house existed back in the day on the corner of Harley Street and Queen Anne Street. And Turner wrote an awful lot about that particular house because he sort of designed it a bit, and he was the first one to have his own gallery and all these sort of things. So in a lot of Turner's sketchbooks, there's loads of little drawings of how he wanted things. So we knew sort of vaguely the style, and there was one photograph of the outside of it as well. And we found this one place in Woolwich. It was on its own, in its own private grounds, but in the middle of Woolwich, so there's tower blocks around it. So the exterior is not brilliant, but when we found that, we just thought this is possibly going to be good for us. I mean, it was covered in dodgy wallpaper and what have you, but we just completely gutted it and got it as far back as we could to original. When we arrived, it was all these sort of magnolia colours, and we're starting to paint all the woodwork and sort of turn it over to the 18th century again. We're influenced quite heavily by Soane, so we're using a lot of his colours, and it goes all the way through. I'm quite excited because we've got the Soane yellow in the drawing room.
How dare you take your leave of me, Billy Turner?
I'll show you into the studio. What we found from the research we've done, we know he sort of separated. He had his watercolours in one area and his oils in another. He'd be drying some watercolours whilst painting some oils. We know he would paint his left side to the window so that he doesn't get a shadow on his hand when he paints. So we know he'll be over in that corner. So that'll become his sort of painting world. At the end of the film, it's going to be falling down. This house is going to feel really decayed because no one's taken care of it.
And I guess that reflects his state
Yeah.
as a person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the character of Hannah Danby as well wasn't apparently a great cleaner.
No.
She looked after her cats.
Dirty water.
And maybe swept the route to the studio, but all the other rooms started to fall to disrepair. And there's a great bit of detail written in one book where there was even dust on the brooms. And another time when she sat stroking a dusty cat, even the cats had dust on them.
Susie got all this stuff, this amazing cornucopia of stuff, and when you get on a set that feels so right, itself is a character. And because you've got to come on that set and make those scenes, that is so important that they are right. And Dick, the genius DOP, had put these filters on the windows which made it really kind of Victorian and gloomy. It felt absolutely right.
We all work in the same domain of light. All painters really, cinematographers, we all deal with the same thing, it's light. Light, the lack of light, overabundance of light, quality of light, sunlight, shadow light, night, day. It's light.
Ah, that's a difficult question. That's a very difficult question. I now, surprisingly, can't help but have a soft spot for the Fighting Temeraire because we brought it to life and made it move.
I think it would have to be one of his seascapes. I'm not going to say the Temeraire. I'm going to resist saying the Temeraire.
There's so many astounding paintings that I'm not even going to list any, but I came to the one that I copied in the end because I've got to know by copying it the genius within it, which is that famous one that he painted when he was tied to the mast. And when I saw the original painting, I was mesmerised by it. It's an unbelievable mixture of terrifying and what the power and beauty of nature can be. It's a privilege to have had the chance to get to understand it.
My favourite Turner painting has to be Fisherman at Sea, and it's the very first painting that he had accepted and hung at the Royal Academy. And he was only, I think it was 19 years old. It's fantastic, cinematic, visually splendid.
I love a lot of the late Turners. I think those are my favourites. And I particularly like Staffer.
Sun Rising Through Vapour. It's at the National Gallery. And very early on, my team and I went to the National Gallery and just drew Turner's for a day. I think the trouble is I wouldn't be able to pin one particular painting down. But as a body, I would go for his seascapes, definitely. His storms and his wrecks and his very emotional response to the sea.